Hello, friends. Mike Margulies here. It's been almost 4 years since our last recording, and we decided to bring Walking the Earth podcast back, well, partly inspired by my decision to travel across the country in time of coronavirus, and it seemed like an interesting thing to document, as well as Justin's own personal recovery from coronavirus and our reflections in general on how life has changed. It's an interesting moment. We didn't have access to the beautiful audio equipment you're hearing me speak in right now. We did things the old-fashioned way on a Zoom call, but we did want to capture this unique moment in time. So with that, I hope you enjoy. Thanks.
Hello and welcome to Walking the Earth podcast. I'm Justin Castle calling in from New York, New York.
And I'm Mike Margulies. I am calling in today from Baltimore, Maryland.
Hey buddy, it's been a while. How are you?
Hey, yeah, we haven't done one of these in almost 4 years.
I feel the rust inhibiting my ability to think.
Yeah, and today, the date of this recording is May 1st, 2020. And we're
Beautiful Friday day.
Yeah, in the middle of the pandemic.
Yes. Yeah, what a pandemic it has been. It's been horrible. But yeah, Mike had the idea that we should get this thing back up and running because of our experiences in the pandemic. It's been kind of somewhat unique. Mike and I saw each other about a month and a half ago, and Everything has changed in a month and a half.
The whole world's gone upside down.
Pretty much. We last saw each other in person on the 9th.
Right in the beginning of this whole thing.
9th of March.
Of March, right. Yeah, I came back from the West Coast. I'm living currently, even though we both grew up here in Baltimore, I have been living in California, in Oakland, and I flew back in the beginning of March, right, as this was starting. We had a wedding, one of our old high school friends.
Yep, exactly. But I'm held up in my New York City apartment, just on the Upper East Side, just staring out the window, wishing that I could spend more time outside.
Right. And I thought I was just coming for 2 weeks, but I've been on the East Coast now, stuck here for 2 months, although I leave tomorrow. So we'll get to that topic of traveling in time of COVID too.
Exactly. But so going back to when we first ran into each other back, we went home. We both went back to Baltimore for that wedding, and It was right around the time. I'm thinking back to my earliest, I had a flashback just recently about talking about COVID. I heard about it back in the beginning of the year, people mentioned it on TV, but it wasn't really prevalent in my mind until 6 weeks ago, until the beginning of March. And really I recorded a stand-up gig back in January with a friend, and one of the comedians I was listening back to did a COVID joke, and honestly, it didn't even. I don't think I even realized how fun, what it was at that point. Right. Back in January, February.
Yeah, I don't even know if in January it was on my radar at all. And in February, I launched. I was planning an event for May. In February, I announced and was selling tickets to an event for May, which obviously that's been postponed. It wasn't. I think it was end of February when it started to be on my radar as, oh wait, this is a series, and it hit California sooner than it hit the East Coast, or at least it was taken seriously sooner in California than it was on the East Coast. I think it was end of February when my peers and social circles started talking about things like quarantining
Really?
And yeah, it was definitely in the conversation. As I remember, before I left for the East Coast, I was even making jokes about it. Before I left, I was seeing
Yeah.
friends, and I met up with some friends like late February, very very beginning of March. Having dinners with some people, and I would say things like, "Oh, life's pretty good pre-apocalypse."
Right. Yeah.
We still have things like restaurants working,
Yeah.
and I kind of had this. I kind of knew that some shit was going down real soon.
Right. And what's interesting to me is like when it started getting kind of realish for me is when was probably the week before. It was probably like the first week in the very first week in March, and like the last week in February, the very first week in March, because I remember like thinking like, oh, I've got this wedding to go to, and then all the news start coming out, and then I'm like, oh, are we is there I guess yeah, I'm still going to this wedding, but
Right.
all this stuff is coming out and coming out, and then I realized like, oh wait, I'm supposed to host Mike at my apartment after the wedding in New York.
Right.
And then I'm like, started thinking about like questioning
Yep.
it a little bit. But at the same time, I was like, I'd say majority of my brain was like, no, this is still going to happen. Like nothing's going to
Right.
change.
Well, I remember. I mean, I definitely was. Consider. There's a part of me was like, should I be flying back to the East Coast now? A part of me was not sure, and I was saying to people, some of the jokes I was making at the time too.
Right.
He was asking, "Oh, how long are you going?" I said, "Oh, 2 weeks theoretically, but we'll see."
Right.
Saying it as like a half joke, but I think a part of me knew there was a real possibility I was not going to be flying back in 2 weeks because of the situation and how it was going. And yeah, definitely after the wedding. So after the wedding,
Yeah.
like you mentioned, I went to New York and I stayed with you for a night.
Yeah.
And yeah, I remember that day too. So this was what day is that? That was like March 8th or something.
Yeah.
I
March
remember
8th was
thinking,
Sunday.
yeah, and I remember thinking even then I was evaluating, wait, should I go to New York right now? And I obviously I did end up doing it, for better or worse. But
Yep.
yeah, so I did stop in New York for a couple of days, very beginning of March. And when I was in New York is when shit started getting real because meetings I had, people were
Right.
starting to cancel the meetings. And I remember when I was at your place is when the notifications came through that like, hey, but it was like this really weird mixed messaging, right? It was like,
Right.
hey, don't use the metro, but if you
If you
have to
don't
use the
have to,
metro, use
you don't use
it.
it if you don't have to. But
Right,
that's the only way I get around. So okay, I'm using it.
right, right. And I remember also around this time though, on the West Coast, stuff was
Right.
already pretty far along. People were already starting to quarantine and lock down.
By
And so
themselves, or was that by like where those
before the government
local?
action, at least in
Okay.
my social circles, people were starting to quarantine around this time. And so I was
Do you
back
think
in
do you
what's
think
that?
everybody was, or just your
Not
friends who
everybody.
are your travel savvy friends?
And it's not. Yeah, I live in a very conscious group of friends out there. So the
Yeah.
communities I'm in, yeah, we're definitely, I would say, ahead of the curve and leading some of it. It was helpful actually because then, I popped in New York a couple days, right, and I came back and I remember taking the Amtrak. By the time I was taking the Amtrak back from New
Yeah.
York to Baltimore, and this was like I guess March 11th, and I'm
Yeah.
on the Amtrak and I'm wearing, I don't know if I was wearing a mask at the time, but everyone who would cough or something, you would
Yeah. You'd
be like,
look at them
whoa.
weird.
And it was all of a sudden everything was starting to get different. And, when I got back to Baltimore, it became clear really soon I wasn't going to get on the
Yeah.
flight back. And I started being kind of like almost like became like the Paul Revere of the coronavirus
Right.
because at this point I saw what was happening in California and I knew the East Coast was only like a week or two behind. So I was starting to tell my family and friends,
Right.
the
Raise the
coronavirus
flag.
is coming, coronavirus is coming, and like and telling people like, hey, we're gonna like have to be locked down pretty because people were not really that locked down yet at this point.
Yeah.
And so I was starting to tell people. I actually even made like some Facebook groups and stuff. I made a Facebook, like the Baltimore quarantine that was modeled after a Bay Area quarantine group. So that,
I gotcha.
for people to like share information and stuff.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'd say around the same time. So we went to the wedding.
Right.
Like people like well, we were there, but at the same time we were like, oh, we're at the wedding. It's not a big deal. Um, but still, that slice of the brain that was like questioning,
It
like
was
should
there.
should I have been there? But you
I
know,
mean, remember when they were passing around? They had the finger food on the trays,
and they had bigger
and I remember
exactly
thinking, like, is this a good idea to have like finger
right.
food, like
I thought
appetizers?
I thought about it, but it's still like I
I
didn't.
still ate it.
I still ate it. You know what I mean? You still
We were
ate the
making
food.
jokes though, right? Because Aaron was making jokes about how,
Yeah,
like, oh, I think I have coronavirus, haha.
right.
You know,
Yeah, and
um,
then he gave it to us all.
maybe. Well,
I don't
you
know.
did get it, right?
Yeah, yeah, man. So I got it.
Well,
I didn't.
you didn't get tested though.
I didn't get tested, but I have two doctors. I'll tell you the story. Do you want to call? You want to? Let's finish that week, and then it's the
Okay,
literally the following weekend is started
sure.
feeling like shit. But basically that week, so that
Well,
week we
I wonder if
came
I
back.
gave it to you, right? Because I had a throat ache that week, and
Yes, you did. You stayed with me on the ninth, you ass. But but I
I
didn't
was
have a
telling
throat ache.
people, I was going around like at this point, like disclosing it. Hey, by the way, I have this throat ache. Are you sure you want to still meet with me? And
Right,
some people did, and some.
right, exactly. And I think that like that at that point, that Sunday, Monday, like you got the messages of like, hey, you shouldn't use if you don't have to use the subway, you shouldn't.
Right.
But
Yeah, I was at your house on the ninth,
you were at my house
at
on
your
the ninth.
apartment.
I worked that day. Then we hung
Right.
out that afternoon. We went. Is that the night we went to the park?
We went to Central Park.
We went to
Dave
Central.
Matthews says the greatest park in the
And the
world,
whole greatest park and the greatest city and the
in the greatest city.
greatest state and the greatest country and the greatest world. At the beginning of the Central, if you listen to what is it, the
The Central Park
Central
album.
Park album, he says it.
Yeah,
So we're riffing on that,
yeah, we had a whole bit.
and then but we were in the park. And there were a lot less people in the park than normal.
Okay.
I thought, and we were like people, all the high school kids were roaming around, which I noticed
Right.
because that stuck out to me. A couple of the high school kids like sat next to us and were trying to
Right.
like
Oh yeah, we were playing
rap
music.
with us while we were playing. Yeah, while we are playing on that bench, and it stuck out to me because I was like, there's way more kids here than I'm used to seeing. It's mainly like older people and couples walking around the Central Park lawn, the Great Lawn. But we had fun. We played music,
Yeah.
and then we had dinner. We had a really good dinner, and we went out and got some burgers and stuff.
Right.
It was a good time. And then
That may have been the
Marissa,
last time I went to a restaurant, or maybe I went once more to a restaurant when I was back in Baltimore with my mom or something.
yeah,
But
I went twice. I went for Marissa's birthday, and we went for a socially distant meetup, and both times the restaurants by that Wednesday the restaurants were bare. Like
right.
it was us. It was us as a couple, and then like one or two other couples, and that's it.
Mm.
And we had a meetup for Marissa's birthday, and there were couples there, but we stayed. We didn't touch. We stayed. We tried to stay apart, and do all that stuff. And by that weekend, that's when people started wearing gloves. They said the restrictions on the number of people that could be in the bars. So that must have been like the maybe like the 13th and 14th, and like no more than 50% of occupancy. And then but that whole entire week I was going to work, I was going to sites, I was going doing normal stuff. My company didn't shut down. Marissa was able to work from home, but yeah. But anyway, like, and then that weekend, Sunday, I started feeling like ass. Like I started getting a head cold.
This is
And
right after I left, a few days later.
right, so you left that like maybe that Wednesday, right? You went back to Baltimore.
Yes.
So I went. So anyway, I saw my entire family that Sunday, the 8th.
Right.
Sunday the 8th, we had a birthday brunch with my entire family. Like my great aunt was there, my like extended family was there, my older uncles were there, and old uncles and aunts were there, and like it was crazy. I saw my entire family, and then I started getting sick the 15th on a Sunday. I remember it very distinctly. Like normal cold. I'm like, oh, I got a cold. So I told my boss, I said, just to be safe, I'm not going in. So I stayed home. Sunday, Monday, I felt like ass. Then Tuesday, I started to feel better. I was like, oh, I'm beating this thing. This is just a cold. And then felt great on Tuesday. Then Wednesday, woke up. Um, I managed to like at that point, like people had already like I'd been already like trying to keep food, trying to like go to the stores, and the shelves were bare. The pasta started to be bare. The tomato sauce was bare. Um, and toilet paper was gone, all that kind of stuff was gone. And I managed to go out on Wednesday and get a thermometer. I found the last thermometer, the only thermometer that I could find. I took my temperature and I had a fever, and then I felt horrible the entire, like, it hit me that day. The entire day was horrible, that day and the next day. Then I felt better, and then by the weekend I was like, oh, whatever I got's gone. And then hit me again on over the weekend. Got the head cold, got the chills, aches, the whole 9 yards. Just felt horrible. Couldn't move. Just was wrapped in like blankets and hold up, just like like when you get a bad flu. And then it was just a roller coaster. Then the following week, it was just aches and chills. I sweat through my sheets multiple nights. I couldn't concentrate. I had headaches. I had indigestion problems. Like my solid stuff wasn't going up. Like almost every single symptom you could name, I felt, and it was just horrible. I barely ate anything. Like I was just trying to make it through. We're watching TV. I was trying to work through the entire thing from home. Like I'd like pass out for an hour, and then I wake up and just try to type and like do as much as I possibly could, because I didn't know if everybody's job was going to get cut. So I worked through the entire thing,
Mm.
and then by the end, so that week I started feeling way worse. So I had a video consult with a doctor, and he basically said, um, via video chat. He was a very nice guy. He said, I went through the exact same story that I just told you. I told him all my symptoms. At that point, I had some like chest. I started feeling weird in my chest, and that's when I was concerned, and that got me to get on the call. I was like, it felt like a little like pins and needles in my chest, and like some heaviness, and like it's a little harder when I talk. And he basically said everything you just described to me, the ups, the downs, the fever, the all those. He says, I'm going through the same exact thing, and I
Oh.
and I have coronavirus.
Oh, wow.
The doctor, he was working
Holy
from home.
shit.
He said, I know that you have it because I have the same exact thing that you just mentioned. And
Wow.
that's how I was diagnosed. So the doctor said that to me, and I'm like, all right, well, that's it. And then he said, just watch your symptoms. If it gets worse, if you can't breathe, if you can't say a sentence, if you can't complete a sentence or two, or go between rooms without losing your breath, then go to the hospital.
Mm.
And I did have moments going between rooms where I'd lose my breath, like the chest heaviness got worse, things like that. Um, the aches and chills were still there. I was sweating through my sheets every night. It was a roller coaster. And then I had another video consult, because it got worse. Like I thought that my the chest stuff alleviated a little bit for a day, and then it got worse towards the end of the week. So I had another video consult. Actually, I think it was that following Monday. So now I'm on my like third week of being sick almost, and she prescribed a Z pack. No, she didn't. She said, if you can't breathe or it gets worse, call me. So later that week it got worse. Then she gave me a Z pack. Then I started to feel better, probably into my like going into my third-ish end of the third-ish week. I got my Z-Pack and I started to feel get better over the course of several days. And it was just a roller coaster, man. It was just not fun.
Oh,
It was worse than any flu that I've had, and I've had salmonella. Like salmonella was pretty horrible, but that lasted a week. This lasted like 2-3 weeks ish, maybe a little bit more.
mm,
It was rough, but
yeah.
I'm doing better. I feel significantly better. It's been probably 3 weeks since, and I'm doing okay. I'm working from home, doing as much as I can, and
Are you fully recovered now?
I would consider myself fully recovered.
Cool. Well,
It's
well, that's good news.
yeah. Sorry. Yeah. So that's my story.
No, man, that's awful. Like it sounds terrible. I'm obviously I'm glad you survived this thing.
Yeah, man.
It's
There were there were moments. There were moments like when I called back the second time where I'm like I can't. I was on a conference call for work, and it was like an hour long conference call, and I was like on the call, like chills, like feeling like shit. And it didn't help that I accidentally took NyQuil during the day. I went to take Dayquil, and I'm like, I can't. I was like, I feel like ass. I can't do this, and I just don't. I don't know. Not just that day, but there were other days where I like couldn't breathe and it was heavy. I couldn't talk like this. I couldn't say. I couldn't do like. I could talk more than they said to be wary of. If you can't get a sentence out, then go to the hospital. I thought about it and I got scared. There's a couple times I got really scared, and then once I got that Z-Pack, I started feeling better, and that really alleviated my worries. But there were moments like towards in that going into the third week that I was like, I was really, I was worried, man, because I didn't know if it kept getting it kept getting better, then it kept getting worse, and then it wasn't going away, and I got scared. I got really scared, but
yeah, man, that's really rough. That sounds terrible.
yeah, it
It's,
was.
uh,
I was. But it's good. I'm glad. I'm thankful that I don't have any major. I don't think I have any side effects, but um, yeah, man. But you don't think you got sick, but you think you might have
I
gotten sick.
mean, I don't know, right? I had a throat ache, which at the time I was kind of thinking, okay, this isn't one of the main symptoms of
Right.
coronavirus. It was more like this dry cough, and and I never had anything. I never had a fever. I never had any. But some people get mild cases though, right? Some people are asymptomatic, and just thinking
Right.
about the timelines, right? You got it right after I left, so the probability that I wasn't somehow exposed to either if I didn't give it to you, or like either that you had it at some point when I was with you, right? Like it
Yeah.
seems likely I was exposed, and
Right.
other people that I saw in New York got it too, and it has to. I'm definitely wondering, like was I exposed to it, or was I even potentially patient zero for some people? I don't know. Um,
You son of a bitch.
I, yeah,
I
I
hope
really
not.
don't know. Yeah, but I certainly did not come down with any kind of severe symptoms. Um, but yeah, who knows, right? Actually, one thing that's interesting though from your story that you shared, you said that you started feeling better with the Z Pack, and that I think we
Yeah.
talked about this before, right? That struck me as odd, just because this is a viral
Yeah.
thing, and Z Packs are,
Right.
antibacterial. So why did a Z
Right.
Pack help you with this viral? I guess it's that the viral infection caused a secondary bacterial
That's
infection.
the theory. That's the theory here, but you know, uh, nobody sampled anything. I didn't go to the lab, get any labs,
Right.
but
And that's another good point too, right? So you don't count towards the official numbers.
correct. I did not
Even though
get
a
tested.
doctor, right, so even though a doctor diagnosed you over video as having it,
I was
the
diagnosed by two
numbers
different doctors.
diagnosed
Two
by two
different doctors.
doctors. Yet on
Yes,
the official numbers that we're looking at, you don't count on those numbers. And you didn't have
correct.
access to a test, right? Even if you wanted one.
No, I asked multiple people, I had multiple doctors, and they said we're not going to test you. We're going
Yeah,
to put you down as you've probably you probably nope, you definitely have it, but we're not testing you. We're saving it for the only people who are hospitalized and the most in need. There are these drive-in centers, but I tried to call them, and you were on hold for hours. And plus, I don't have a car,
sure.
so I'm not going. I'm not driving anywhere.
Yeah, right. And it makes you wonder too, right? The numbers that are being put out there are complete bullshit, right? Like,
Right.
how many people had the experience you had that probably more than likely had it, but or even got diagnosis, but weren't tested, therefore don't count towards the official count. So
E-
way, way more people. Not to mention people who had it and didn't have anything near what you had. So the numbers are just bogus.
Yeah, I've talked to several customers of mine because I've been working this entire time. I've talked to friends, um, and even my own sister, and numerous people. I described that exact story to you, and they said, "Oh, I had the same thing." And I said, "Well, guess what? You probably had it."
Right,
I'm
right,
gonna say with 95% certainty that's what you had, you know. And
right.
I was talking to a customer, and I said, "Yeah, my wife had that and has that right now." And I said, "Well, guess what? She's got it." Stay away.
Right.
um, so,
It's crazy,
but
man.
yeah, it's wild. And the only way they're going to know is if they do that, antibody test, and they start doing a wider test, sampling, so they can get better numbers. But
Right.
when you do sample studies, you only need a portion of the population, and you can extrapolate that if you test 1,000 people, that's a significant sample size in terms of data from an analytical standpoint. When a lot of drug companies do their drug tests, they don't test like tens of thousands of people. They do a
Mm,
sample. um,
right.
so it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, so another thing interesting too, right, is so maybe you've got immunity now, but maybe not, and
Yeah,
we don't know that.
yeah, it's exactly. I have to treat myself like I'm not. I don't have any. uh,
Yeah.
have you been wearing masks? I
Now,
absolutely have.
yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Nowadays, if I'm go to the grocery store, I definitely am wearing a mask.
Yeah.
Um, I do walk outside in the park and just not near anybody without a mask on.
Right.
And but yeah, if I go to whenever I go to like get groceries or something like that, for sure. And I'm
Yeah.
and tomorrow, I guess that's a nice segue there.
Yeah.
Tomorrow, when I get on an airplane to fly from Baltimore back to Oakland, I'm definitely going to be wearing a mask and
Yeah.
gloves.
Holy shit.
And yeah, it's just a whole thing, right? Traveling across the country ain't what it used to be.
so
Um,
so you need to back up a little bit. So what compelled you to go back to San Francisco in what is still considered to be the pandemic? We're May 1st. The lockdown started a month and a half ago. At least in New York, we're still, have high restrictions until at least the 15th, if not further out. I don't know what it's like in San Francisco's still got to be locked down. Is Maryland locked down, or and
yeah,
that's my first question. My second question is what's compelling you?
Yeah, I think everything is still pretty locked down. What does lockdown mean? I think there's different degrees of it. Some of which
Right.
is government like enforced lockdown, and some of it is just socially enforced lockdown. And I
Right.
don't, it's hard for I don't know the details of like exactly what the rules are here versus there and how they compare. But I do know that I mean, because practically wise, I've been living. Yeah, I guess I'll back up and share. Like, have been quarantining, right? So regardless of
Right.
whatever the official things you are and are not allowed to do, I have been practicing and I will continue to. And so, right. So we had this wedding. I flew back for this
Right.
wedding. took the right after the wedding, went to New York for a few days, and then
Yeah.
that's when this thing just kind of really blew up. So came back to Baltimore. My original plan had been to, like, after coming back from New York to Baltimore, to fly back a few days later. But by
Right.
this point, it was just looking like a bad idea to get on a plane at that point. So I basically kept delaying my flight. I delayed it by like a week or two, and I just like kept delaying it, delaying it,
Nice.
until I eventually canceled it altogether.
Uh,
Luckily it was a Southwest flight. Props to Southwest.
yeah. What,
You
you got a full refund? Is that what happened, or?
they give you a credit for
Okay,
your flight.
that's
But
good.
you can change your flight infinite times, and you
Great.
don't have to worry about it. It's the ultimate flexibility. So I've always liked Southwest for this reason.
That's a
Um,
great reason.
yeah, and so what happened for me was, initially I was at my dad's house, but
Right.
then I actually ended up staying with my former partner, Amy,
Okay.
and
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
which was the last thing I expected to happen. As we had broken up several months ago,
Yeah.
and um, then then the pandemic happened. So
And
turns
you
out, like, sorry.
and you kind of got well. You were kind of stuck there, right? More or
Yeah,
less, or
yeah. Well, so we met up, and it was the first time we had met up in a long time. And I don't want to go into too much detail into our relationship, but
right.
just from a high level, let's just say, like, it was definitely like, there was definitely a lot of healing, and this is an interesting, like, silver lining to the
Right.
coronavirus. Is there was this interesting opportunity that we had.
Yeah.
So after we kind of recalibrated, we just decided that we would, like, if we're gonna, we knew quarantine was coming at this point. At this point, it hadn't happened yet in Baltimore. People weren't really, like, quarantining it, and this is when I was doing the Paul Revere thing. I was the one actually telling people,
Right.
like, hey, everybody, like, this quarantine thing is for real. It's coming. Like, get ready. Start getting your groceries. Like, we got to get 2 weeks of groceries and all this stuff. And I was telling my family and friends, everyone, like, hey, this is for real. Like, I'm watching what's happening with my friends over in the West Coast, and we're only like a
Yeah.
week or two behind them.
Hmm.
So as everyone was sort of getting ready for this, we just had a conversation. We talked about it and decided that we would like to quarantine together. And I preferred to quarantine, with her versus with my dad. And so we
Yeah.
made a decision. We made a conscious decision to do that. Certainly, then, we didn't know exactly what we were getting into, right?
Right.
And we didn't know how long this was going to be. But I've been here now for almost 2 months.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, so it's the two of us. We have one other housemate, and who's an old friend, and we've pretty much been, we've been quarantining together. We, at one point in time, also had our neighbors on the apartment above us, a couple floors above us, were part of our quarantine. But
Quarantine.
yeah, but one of them wasn't really keeping the quarantine. So then our quarantine was down to three. Um,
Right.
and so we've been keeping a pretty tight quarantine here, with the exception of, I would go and visit family at a distance. So I would see my parents or our grandmother outside, staying
Right.
apart. So we're, doing that kind of thing, but we're not really hanging out with anyone outside of the people here.
Yeah.
Um, and so it's been a really interesting experience on so many levels.
Yeah. It
Um,
always is when you're
the,
stuck in in
yeah,
confinement together.
yeah, and it was very unexpected. And yeah, it's been super interesting. And uh, why am I changing it up
Why?
now?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, for one thing, we're sharing a room, and that's which isn't really, that we each need to have our own space. So basically, in a sense, I'm looking at long term now, right? We don't know how long this is going to happen. How
Right.
long is this going to go on? And so I'm starting to think about the medium to long term game, let's call it.
Right.
So for medium to long term, I'm looking at this question of if I'm going to be in a quarantine or semi quarantine situation. Who knows what restrictions might be lifted or not in the coming weeks? But if I'm going to be in a quarantine for a medium to long term, for potentially months more, what's the best scenario to be in? And I just kind of making that honest assessment, I realized this wasn't it. Where I need to be in my own space, right? And I just also have different schedule than other,
Right.
than everyone I'm living with. I'm still very much
Yeah.
on a West Coast schedule. So many of the people that I'm connected to, that I'm socializing with over Zoom now, right, are on West Coast time, 3 hours behind. So when it's 6 o'clock over there, it's 9 o'clock over here.
Right.
So there's that element's going on.
I mean, plus you're
And
not home, man. You're
I'm
not.
not home, right? I have an apartment in Oakland that's been more or less vacant. This whole time I had a subletter for a little small period of that. But yeah, I want to be home. I want to be in my own space. My short term plan, right, is to get on this plane tomorrow, and I'm going to do as much um, risk reduction on that as I can. I'll revisit that in a moment what that looks like. But
Yeah.
the plan is after I get back to Oakland, I have an apartment that's empty, so I'm going to self quarantine. And
Okay.
so I have the ability to self quarantine for some amount of time. I don't know the exact number of days, 2 weeks, or if somebody in my circles feels comfortable seeing me sooner, we'd have to get consent from everyone who they are connected to, or if one person
Right.
wants to, there's all kinds of interesting conversations to have around
Yeah.
that. But I'm going to self quarantine for some amount of time is my short term plan, and my medium to long term plan is to find a community house. And so the idea is I want to set myself up in if I'm going to be quarantined in a more ideal quarantine. And so most of the communities, I have a very, very vast community out there, and that's where most of the community where I'm going to find this kind of thing, really. And so I'm
Right.
looking at options also, like, maybe going even further out, being somewhere, what does it really look like, the ideal scenario? So maybe I'm going to go somewhere that's more nature, also with fast Wi-Fi, of course. But I could imagine myself living somewhere like Arcata, by the beach,
Okay.
and in a house like 4 bedroom house, let's say, with fast Wi-Fi, but like with let's say like other creative,
Essential.
right? But with other creative musician types, right?
Right.
An environment where I'm near nature, where it's very I don't have to make an effort to go outside and experience it, but it's just something where very accessible. I'm very
Right.
highly incentivized without a lot of friction to get my outdoor time. Where I'm surrounded by people that are going to incentivize me to do. No, I'm trying to be in an environment that's going to be healthy for me on a medium to long term scale. So playing music, going outside, this kind of thing. So I'm trying to design for that, designing for a medium to long term.
Got it.
So
Okay.
the reason for risking, let's say, in the short term, taking a flight like this, is to make myself healthier in the medium to long term.
Got it.
Um,
Because of the unknown factor being the length of the quarantine and the
yeah,
length of all these measures, basically.
yeah, and so I don't know exactly how it's going to shake out in this, the medium long term plan that I'm working on, but I'm gonna get out there, get back to my place first, get my stuff in order over there, do the self quarantine, and then, you know, figure out. It involves finding people to build a quarantine with. It involves finding a location, and it
Right.
may not necessarily be in the bay itself. It could be further out. Where it's also going to be cheaper. The advantage to paying all the high rent in the bay is all the stuff going on, and I have an apartment that's located in, like, where there's lots of cafes and restaurants, and near the BART, which is the metro out there. That
Right.
stuff doesn't matter right now. So
Yeah.
my apartment, which I love, isn't necessarily the best place, but it's great short term because a place to land and self quarantine.
Got it.
So that's kind of the vision here, of what I'm going for.
Got it. Is to get into your old place, get into a routine, and get some
So,
normalcy ish.
yeah, and really the big goal here is set myself up to be in a situation where I can be healthy in a quarantine situation in a medium to long term scenario, taking into account all of the different factors that go into health. And
Right.
environment is a big one.
Yeah, I will say that I mean I've been locked in a one bedroom apartment. I've got a bedroom and a living room that has the an island and a kitchen and then a bathroom. And like if I'm on this call right now and I'm in the bedroom and you're spending a lot of time in a confined space
Mm-hmm.
and like I think being sick the first few weeks definitely gave me an extra 2 3 weeks of sanity because all I was like just like trying to be healthy, man, just trying to get through it. And then after that, I think I lagged. So I think the country has been stir crazy for
Yeah,
6 weeks. I've been stir crazy for only the past 3 weeks, four
right.
weeks, or two and a half, 3 weeks, something like that. And I feel it, man. I definitely feel it.
Yeah, it's
I
it's tough, um, and it's we don't know how long it's going to be. So yeah,
Yeah, it's
but
hard. You need your alone time. You need your
yeah,
space. You need both.
right.
Being able to be together and being able to
Well,
be apart a little bit.
and that's what's crazy, right? Because I had a perfect scenario for that. I had a scenario where I had a place where I had a lot of my own time, but I also was constantly going out and social. I mean, the Bay is crazy. There's so much going on all the time, so I was always having interaction. Also had a place to go to myself, and now it's kind of like you don't really get to do that quite as easily. You kind of have to either, whatever scenario you're in, you're just in. You're not. You don't
Yeah,
get as much flexibility of changing. Are you with a lot of people or not? And so I'm trying to find that balance. And I do think and I'm doing this because I believe I'm going to find a good solution. But it's in order to get to it, I have to go through this kind of odyssey
right,
to get there. Involving first traveling by plane in this time, and second the self quarantine, just being by
right.
myself and alone, which will be its own challenge, and I'm sure also be its own growth. It's a great growth opportunity.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. It's gonna be something for sure.
yeah,
That's so the plan is document that.
yeah, well, exactly. We figured out, if I'm gonna, that was part of the impetus for, I reached out to you like, hey, let's do a podcast because I figured if I'm gonna go on this odyssey, let's document it. I read an article someone posted that was kind of part of the inspiration. Someone who documented his cross country travel, and I figured I would do the same. And yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna do my best to keep myself as safe as possible. So of course that means wearing a mask, wearing gloves. Um, you know, sanitizing my seat and tray table, all this
Yeah,
stuff. And I'm going to do some more research tonight on more specific things that I could do to travel as safely as possible.
yeah,
On some reassuring things, though, that I saw that happened today, actually. So I actually got an email from Southwest detailing all of their procedures. And what's nice to know is that they are doing, they share how they do all this extensive cleaning in between the flights. They have these filters. They already have. They're limiting the number of people on each flight so that you can have maintain some distance. And to that point, I for the first time ever in my life, and I fly Southwest a lot. I got boarding group A. So, so
congratulations.
yes, it's an accomplishment. I get a badge for this, which I believe is indicative of their just not being that full of a flight, which is
well,
good news.
well, I wanted
Um,
to. I was surprised. You told me. I asked you this the other day. I thought that the ticket price would have been like severely discounted, but you're
well,
saying it
they
wasn't that bad. It
well
was.
they canceled a lot of flights. They used to be flight multiple. So another risk reduction thing I did was I'm choosing to take a direct flight. Right, I don't want to get on multiple airplanes. I
Right.
want to have as little exposure as possible. There used to be all kinds of direct flights from Baltimore to Oakland. Now there is one direct flight per week.
Oh
It's on
wow.
Saturdays. Yeah, and because I was looking at that, I've been looking at this a lot, and so that they just reduced the number of flights. It's just not as many people flying, so there's not as many planes.
Huh.
Yeah, the flight was pretty. It was like $250 or something
Okay.
to fly. So it
Is
was
that
not.
normal?
Yeah, this wasn't particularly cheap. Definitely not a cheap flight.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not. It's not outrageous, not
What was your
expensive
flight
relative to
here?
norm.
What was your flight here
It was
in
about
comparison?
that. That's a pretty typical. If you can get it cheaper if you book it earlier, but
Right.
um, it's
Yeah, I see. So it's not that different. I'm going to ask you before tomorrow. You need to like document before, like take a couple videos or like voice notes.
I'll take a picture of myself with my backpack and mask on and
Yeah.
everything.
Yeah, no, take a couple videos like, "Hey, here's the airport. Here's like I want to see what the inside of that flight looks like, to be honest. Like I
Okay.
want you to take a video of the inside of the
Yeah,
plane
I'll
and then
document
post it
it.
so everybody can see, and the airport itself, because lockdowns, we're still on a reduced uh everything's been reduced. Everybody should barely anybody should be traveling in theory. um
Right.
and I don't, businesses are supposed to be work from home, at least in New York they are. So essential
Yeah.
businesses are the only ones open right now, and
Yeah.
people should be traveling very minimally.
Definitely, and so the other factor in this that I've been spending this week coming to grips with, right, is this isn't like it used to be. Yeah, I'd fly to California, but I would know, oh, yeah, I'll come. I can come back if I need to, and I would have that ability to come back here to Baltimore, where my family is. And I used to. I was even I've been living in California the last 2 years, but I've also spent a lot of time coming back to the East Coast because we have your wedding too, a few
Yeah.
months ago, right? And
October, end of
congratulations.
October. Thank you. Thanks.
and and that there's weddings and all kinds of reasons to come back, and I was fairly bi-coastal, and over the couple years I was increasingly spending more of my time in California, but I would still come back to Baltimore pretty frequently, and I still have a lot of ties to Baltimore. This time though, it's not like that. You can't just hop back and forth between coasts,
Yeah.
arguably that wasn't probably a very sustainable thing anyway. The amount of
Yeah.
hopping back and forth,
Exactly.
but um, yeah, coming to grips with when I fly to California tomorrow, I don't know when I'm going to be back in Baltimore. I don't know when I'll be able to come back to Baltimore. So this week I saw at a distance, my dad and my grandmother and my mom
Yeah.
earlier today, and it carried this kind of weight to it. The goodbye wasn't like, all right, cool, see you next time you're in Baltimore. It was like goodbye indefinitely, like goodbye until maybe next year, or we don't know. And
Yeah.
so I'm saying these goodbyes now that are a lot more difficult and a lot more meaningful in some way, right?
Yeah.
There, because
I
it's not, you can't just hop back and forth.
yeah. I think that the one saving grace of this whole thing, not that it's not saved by any means, it's just like the one bright side, is that I will say that I have been in deeper touch with my family.
Mm,
All the, I know people have said this, but I truly felt like like we had a Passover Seder, and like my, sometime, I think last year I split them. Like I can't remember if it was this year or the last year. I split them. Went to my in-laws, and we went to my parents, and then this year we did both. Like both nights, I saw both people, and we're all in the same room. And my sister in California is there, and it's like,
oh,
and it's just and now we're FaceTiming. Like we could have
right,
FaceTimed. We should have been FaceTiming for years. I've been out of
right,
Baltimore for over a decade, and like we don't FaceTime this much. You know what I mean?
right,
But
right.
I think I do have a deeper connection with them. It feels like I actually felt like giddy because I felt like, wow, I feel like I'm there right now.
Yeah, yeah,
I feel a better, just a stronger connection, just like
yeah.
kind of existing, eating. We didn't. after we did the Seder, we just left the camera on and just ate. Like literally, we ate with each other, and it was nice, you know.
Yeah. I mean, there's
Um,
totally silver linings to this, right? Yeah, things like that, things that I guess we could have done before that just we weren't doing, and now they're happening, and I'm seeing it too. In my work too. And so many people listening to this probably are aware. I have a platform called Psychedelic Seminars, and I
yeah,
do, and I have been doing events, and prior to this, I had been moving to kind of a more online than a live event focus with the platform. So in some way, I was actually very well prepared for this, strangely enough. But all these new things are happening now. So now there's these interesting opportunities where doing crowdcasts, doing interviews on online, and doing these online events, doing conferences online. And there's this interesting, this doesn't replace that human connection. No,
no,
no way at all. And I'm somebody who I'm very extroverted, and I loved going to these conferences
yeah,
for the connection, for just being immersed in it, and it's difficult, right? Because it used to be when you would meet up, whether you go to an event or a party or anything social, it used to be like this fully rejuvenating thing being
hmm
social, because you were not only were you connecting with other people, you're also putting down the computer. And for someone like myself and many others in the modern age, I spend so much of my time on the computer,
right,
and so it was always like really rejuvenating. And nowadays when you're doing socializing, I'm talking to you, right? It's you get part of it, you get that social interaction, but you're also still there's another piece that's still draining because you get Zoom fatigue. There's
right,
an aspect
yeah,
of being on there. So it doesn't none of this stuff that's happening. There's a lot of cool stuff. It doesn't replace the face to face, yet there is something cool about it. Like, for example, the online conferences, they don't beat the face to face, but now when you do conferences, say on Crowdcast, you're giving your talk or you're interviewing somebody,
right,
and there's live chat, and the
right,
audience is engaging, right? And in real time, I'm doing talks now and interviews where I'm interacting with the audience in
right.
real time, which isn't really hasn't I don't know if it's I wouldn't say it's not I suppose it's possible to do it at an in person, but not obvious. You're in person, people if they're engaged in the conference, they're
No,
watching you,
they're
right?
watching. They're not talking. They're not
And they're not
interacting with the thing.
texting. Ideally, they're not looking at our screen and texting, but they're watching you give your talk. But now people who are engaged in the conference are actually chatting. So there is something cool about it as someone, as a speaker, to be able to speak in real time to your audience and have and even when I'm not the speaker, when I'm watching other people speak as an audience member, I'm able to like give commentary
Right.
around what's being discussed. And so
Exactly.
I find that to be a really interesting thing of as far as these online
Well,
events and conferences go.
well, it's a new thing in society in general because now, while somebody's giving a news conference, people are live tweeting it. Like when Cuomo was talking the other day, and then Trump, commented on his live uh,
Oh,
update,
I
and then
didn't
he
see
had to
that.
address in real time. A journalist asked him, said, "This is what Trump just tweeted right now. What do you have to say about this?" And
Man.
he had to stop what he was doing and respond in real time to what was being tweeted. Like, and I mean, that's the negative. Is it a negative? I don't know. There are positive and negatives to everything, but I think that like the fact that you can interact and affect something live is both good,
Yeah.
and it's going to affect politics and everything majorly, because now if somebody is really aggressive and you want to silence somebody, you just out tweet them
Mm,
while they're speaking, and you
mm.
interrupt them. Like it's just interesting. I don't
Yeah,
know.
it's super interesting. It's yeah, I think that there's I don't know if it's clear what's good or what's bad. There's pros and cons. There's new things, and there's difficulties. There's opportunities. There's challenges, silver linings, all of that.
Yeah,
It's I mean, yeah, I think that one thing though in all this, it's kind of related to this topic, right? It's just for someone like myself who does a lot of work on the computer, and also is very social. It's challenging finding the balance in this new environment of time on the computer and on the computer, right? And it used to be much easier. It used to be easy because I could do some work and then close the machine, go socialize, and
Right.
like there was a balance of socializing and working and computer and not computer. But now,
It's
um,
all
right, if the socializing is now also computer, that means you have to do well. Part of it is building relationship to self, and that's what I'm going to be experiencing if I'm self quarantining and I want to be healthy. I don't want to spend all of my time in front of a screen. So I'm going to need to spend a lot of time cultivating relationship to self. So picking up the guitar, spending more time writing. It's going to force me
right.
to be
You got to be more
to
regimented a
be
little.
yeah. I have to definitely be regimented, and build a good routine and build a good relationship with myself. And I think that's part of the. I know it's part of my own work now, and I'm sure I'm not the only one.
Yeah,
Um, it's how
totally.
it's figuring ways to yeah, when you don't have the same outlets of social events and
Yeah,
meeting up with other people,
it's
what do you do when okay, put the thing down,
it's
and what am I
hard.
doing with myself?
It's
Yeah.
hard on a day to day basis because I'm working from home. Like I've done this with Marissa. Like I've worked from home, and we both worked from home at the same time, and we're both look at each other and say, "All right, it's time to stop." But now
Mm.
it's like, but at the same time, you got that report. Like I had today. I had a report due. I
Did you get
woke
the
up.
new cover page on the TPS report?
No, the TV. No, I did not.
Did you get the memo?
No, I didn't get the memo.
We sent the memo, the new cover letter on the TPS
Oh,
report.
damn it. But the point is that you don't there is a separation. I've done this before. I've worked from home and I am able to do it. But at the same time, it does bleed out. There is a
Yeah,
bleed over. There's an absolute bleed
yeah. If
over.
you're working from home, it's hard to draw that
When
boundary,
I
the work
when I,
life.
when I have a stressful day, I had a stressful day yesterday, today, and it's hard to unwind from that. And when I'm at work and I used to get on the subway and I have that 30-minute ride home, it is a physical and a mental disconnect. And 30 minutes when I'm like, all right, this is the separation between me and my how I felt before, and now it's like, all
Mm,
right, I've been on stressful calls all morning, and you know, how do you get off of that? How do you get
yeah,
off of that? you
yeah,
know and oh yeah, you're home and it's time to make dinner, and like you gotta
yeah,
definitely have that separation,
yeah.
for sure.
And I'm spending more time like watching movies on the computer than I used
Yep.
to, and that makes it hard too, right? Because now I'm spending more time. I'll watch a movie from my computer in bed, but now it's like, oh, I'm bringing my computer in bed a lot more than I used to. I used to have more of the computer wasn't in the bedroom as much,
Right.
and for a good reason. But now it is, and then it's so easy for that to bleed into, oh, let me just check my email, and and
Yep.
and and because everyone else is also more connected. I'm more on the computer all the time. The information's coming in all the time too. There's way
Yeah.
more emails coming in at all hours.
Yep.
So
Exactly.
there's a lot of yeah. You have to self manage yourself better. I'm gonna have to do a lot of this work of building better habits here.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. But you know I did want to say before, like after I started feeling better, I'm jumping around, but after I started feeling better, like I had like the clearest mind after I started like physically feeling better and not worrying about living, or and I was doing the screen stuff, but then I was like, I feel like rejuvenated, and I started doing more creative stuff. Like
mm,
speaking of silver linings, like I made the Leo and the Bats thing,
oh yeah, that's
and
great.
and like after I started feeling healthy, I felt like a kid in a candy shop. I felt like a new zest for life. Like I should have been doing that. I should have been calling my parents this whole time. I should have been making more creative shows and
Right.
doing the things, and like all these mental barriers and whatnot, and realizing like I should be doing this the whole time. And the other thing I realized that I don't know, you're not home, so unfortunately you can't feel this, but like being home, I feel like I just kind of like we spent time at home on the weekends, spent time at home at night, but like I feel like when you're at your home, your parents' house, I know the feeling might be a little different, but when you're at the place that you grew up in and you spent years in, you spent multiple extended days, like summer days where you didn't have camp in, and you feel like you've lived in a place. Like I didn't have that feeling in a lot of different places I've lived, but like the fact that I am home and I am living in my space, even though it is a one bedroom, like I feel like I'm actually living here now as opposed to
Mm,
just sleeping here and
right.
existing here. Like it
Yeah, and
feels
that's
like a place it feels lived in now and
right.
more warm to me.
Yeah, and that's definitely like a thing that's an element to my decision making. Right, is I'm not in my home. I'm a guest in someone's home, and it's it, and I'm really grateful to have been taken in and to be able to stay here. And it's as far as like a more medium to long term solution, it's not a good one, right? And so, um, yeah, it's just time to go home.
Exactly. And so next steps, you're gonna document tomorrow
Uh
and
huh.
then you're gonna document the journey. And then let's check in once you get back
Yeah.
to your place.
Yeah, it
Does it
sounds good.
sound
I'll
good?
have plenty to report on, and both on we can talk about the journey itself by plane, and I'm sure I'll have also plenty to report on as far as like the self quarantine afterwards.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a lot of things we haven't gotten into, but
Yeah,
we'll get into those next time.
yeah.
But in the meantime, this is Justin Castle in New York City.
And I am Mike Margulies in Baltimore for now.
All right, take care. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.